Namaskar, everyone. A very good evening to one and all. I'm Vasundhara Singh on behalf of Advaita Spiritual Society of Delhi University. Welcome all the esteemed guests and audience in its first session of its speaker series, Utkarsh. Advaita, the Spiritual Society, is an endeavor to help students transcend the difficulties and uncertainties that are almost inseparable from today's life and disseminate spiritual wisdom, spanning diverse streams in an apprehensible and pragmatic way. The Society envisions itself to be an inclusive and syncretic forum for healthy discussions, dialogue, reflection, and meditation. About Utkarsh, it means ascending to glory, and Advaita, through this lecture series, intends to propagate the tenets of Bharatiya Darshan and Dharma and drive the youth to the path of righteousness and thus ascend the ladder of consciousness and enlightenment. Utkarsh is a humble attempt of ours to make use of the wisdom that the minds of eminent scholars like Dr. David Frawley keep safe to propagate it far and wide. We sincerely hope that this initiative will leave its mark and shall help you rethink your convictions and revisit your thought processes. I'd now like to invite Aditi ji for Saraswati Vandana.
Ya kundetu tushar har dhawala ya shubhava savrita ya veena varadand mandit kala ya shweta या ब्रह्मा जप शंकर प्रभृति देवैः सदा वन्दिता सा मां पातु सरस्वती भगवती
Thank you, Aditi ji. We are glad to inform you that today we are joined by eminent Vedacharya and author Dr. David Frawley, also known as Pandit Vamadeva Shastri. He is a recipient of the prestigious Padma Bhushan Award for his work in the fields of Ayurveda, Yoga, Vedanta, Vedic Astrology, Vedic Studies, Hindu Dharma, and Ancient India. He has a Doctor in Literature degree from SVYASA, which is the highest educational title possible in the field of Yoga and Vedic Sciences. He also has a Doctor in Literature degree from Manohar, Lohia, Ayodhya University. Dr. Frawley is a proponent of Vedanta and a senior teacher of traditional Ayurveda. He has translated and interpreted a number of texts associated with it, which are acclaimed in both spiritual and scholarly circles. He is the author of 40 plus published books. His latest books, What is Hinduism? Awaken Bharata and Arise Arjuna, have also received widespread critical acclaim. He is the director of the American Institute of Vedic Studies and has helped found several Vedic schools across the world. Therefore, I request the president of Advaita Society, Yuvraj ji, to welcome the esteemed guest of honor, Dr. David Frawley.
Thank you, Vasundhara. Namaskar, everyone. We welcome everyone to the first session of the Utkarsh series. We welcome Dr. Frawley for joining us today for this dialogue on Bhartiya Darshan. Advaita is thankful to the principal of Hansraj College, Dr. Rama. Ma'am has been instrumental in various initiatives for the welfare of the student community and promotion of Bhartiya values. We would also like to extend our gratitude to our convener, Dr. Parul Ma'am, for her constant support and backing. Advaita would like to thank everyone who has contributed to the mission that we are serving, that is, individual transformation and global harmony. Thank you, everyone.
And I'd now like to request our esteemed guest of honor for today, Dr. David Frawley, to bestow the session with his insightful words. Over to you, sir.
Namaste, Shri Guru Bhyo Namaha. I'm very happy to join you from the other side of the world and also from the other side of time. It is just nearly sunrise here. I'm very happy to be with Delhi University again. I have done some programs there over many years, not on a regular basis, but off and on various subjects, and also in other universities, etc., in Delhi and throughout India. I'm very happy to know that Delhi University has this special Advaita society that is addressing the deeper issues of culture, spirituality, and civilization. And I would like to thank Vasundhara and Yuvraj Singh for their wonderful welcome. And it is my honor to be with you and to share my views with so many students. And they are my views, ideas. I don't claim to have answers or solutions, but it's important that we engage in dialogue and teaching and discussion on various levels. There are many critical issues facing society today, as we know. We are still in the midst of this pandemic, which comes up and down and may have some new chapters ahead. But overall, as a society, we have to move forward, adapt, adjust. We have a powerful new information technology that can bring us into greater communication, but it can also spread easily opinions, distortions, and contradictory points of view. So today, it's not just a matter of studying traditional ancient texts, philosophy, but dealing with the many ideas that are around us, the ongoing discussions and even conflicts. And India is in a very important situation there in the world because India has the world's oldest civilization. It's Bharatiya, Sanskriti, Bharatavarsha. Bharat's already mentioned as old as the Rig Veda. And of course, Bharat as the basic Vedic people, Bharata as the name for India, traditional name throughout the history. But the point is, it has preserved a unique spiritual civilization, embracing all the arts and the sciences as well, and one that is rooted upon such important principles as Advaita, which is, of course, unity and non-duality over all. And there are very important civilizational issues that the world has to learn from India. Unfortunately, India is still portrayed largely in the colonial or Marxist discourse from a historical and cultural perspective. And even in textbooks in India, students do not learn much about the great gurus, yogis, rishis, philosophies, sampradayas, or the history of the country, its influence throughout Asia, even throughout the world, the fact that the Bharatiya culture, civilization for many centuries also prevailed throughout Southeast Asia to Indonesia, even the Philippines through Buddhism. It influenced China. Tibet is following even Indian Buddhism today, influenced through Central Asia, through Europe, starting from ancient European cultures, whether Greek, Roman, Celtic, Slavic, Germanic. We can trace influences throughout the steppes of Central Asia from India there, or even by sea through the Middle East. So India has a very important civilizational heritage that has largely been neglected or misunderstood. And it's very important that that civilizational heritage is brought back into play and addressed today. Because the main question of civilization is, who are we as a species? What are we aiming for? What is the goal of our nations, our cultures, our education, even our religions? Are we one humanity? Are we various conflicting groups defined by everything from ideology politically, to religion, to ethnicity, to age, to finances, economics, so many things? We are in a stage where humanity is very divided, even in the so-called global era. And even in the so-called global era, we are promoting largely a more uniform idea of civilization that's fairly recent and is not inclusive of the other civilizations at the level of ideas and insights. It may say everybody should have the right to vote, but what is the education that we are receiving globally? What are the cultural connections that are going on, or interchanges, or even the end of culture? All over the world, languages are disappearing. Indigenous cultures are being sidelined. New generation is taking up a technology that teaches, that's not neutral. It teaches a certain civilizational view through its orientation and through the ideas and the values it puts forth. Now, in this context, India is very important and very special. On one hand, it is the oldest continuous civilization in the world. We still find the ancient Vedas chanted today, after perhaps more than 5,000 years. It would be as if the pyramid text of ancient Egypt were still alive, or the oldest historical text in the world. It's only true that this has gone on in India, although all the ancient cultures have put forth the idea that there are great sages, 7 sages, behind humanity, guiding us, and that there are higher forces, consciousness, universality, divine energies that we need to understand and address to understand the universe in which we live. Of course, over the centuries, this Bharatiya civilization has developed as well as spread. Its terminology has changed in certain ways, its iconography. All civilization is changing at various levels. But the essence of the Bharatiya culture has remained, which is going back to, I would say, the prime concept of the Vedas, which is the unity of the individual human being and the universe as a whole, that there is a cosmic Purusha, cosmic person. Universe is one being, not only one family, but one being, one person, one organism, one consciousness. And that universal being is reflected, or can be reflected, in the human being. It is the role of the human being to reflect the greater reality of universal consciousness, what physics can call the self-aware universe. What we call intelligence is largely mind, which is embodied intelligence, or a creaturely phenomenon, which we have and which animals and the rest of nature, at least to some degree, also has. But intelligence and consciousness is also a universal principle like space. It pervades everything. Everything is conscious and alive. The entire universe is one being. So this prime principle of universal unity and the reflection of the individual and the cosmic is there at the root of the Dharmic tradition since the time of Vedas. It's expressed in different terms like interdependence of all life, need to respect all beings, and awareness of many lokas and realms of being and life and consciousness beyond the physical, many Brahmandas, many different types of creatures, not only on earth, but elsewhere, and a vast and teeming universe that is full of life, full of creativity, and overall very benefic. Its goal is that we all come together and manifest this greater reality. In this context, however, we all know that we as human beings are not an enlightened species, although we have moments of enlightened awareness, and we have enlightened teachers who may come among us at various times, and we have people striving for higher enlightenment or self-realization. But overall, our species has been characterized by materialism, violence, control, domination, outward view. And we see the record of history is not such a pleasant record to go through, although we do have moments of great art or periods of great insight, or even among the worst periods, we do have individuals who can discover and share greater truths and realities and affect humanity as a whole, at least to some degree. The technology today gives us the ability to come together and communicate, but we still have not set forth this greater civilizational understanding. Science still doesn't know whether there is any type of independent consciousness at a biological level in the human being. We tend to look at the human being more through chemistry and outer conditioning than through any inner being. And we still haven't decided whether the human being has an inner being that transcends birth and death, or whether we are connected to other cycles of life, other births. So there's still much that is not known. Physics recognizes there may be a field of consciousness behind the universe. There is some debate as to what it is or how it expresses itself, or whether we can know it at all. So even with all of our information and the experiments, the technology, what science has been able to prove outwardly, there is still a lot of confusion about who we are, what is truth, how we can interact. And in this regard, the Bharatiya Sanskriti provides us some answers and a different point of view. The Bharatiya tradition teaches us that there is not simply an outer reality revealed through the mind and senses, characterized by name, form, number, and appearances, that there is an inner reality, both within ourselves and in the greater universe, a consciousness, a being, a life, a presence that is all-pervading, that is ultimately behind and beyond time, space, and causation, and within us, and also behind and beyond body and mind, and even the outer factors of expression and experience we have. This doesn't mean the laws of physics don't work, that fire doesn't burn and water isn't wet, and there aren't certain processes that we can see and understand in the planets, the stars, the earth, and so forth. But it says there is another inner dimension to reality that can also be known rationally, objectively, and intimately through our consciousness by turning our awareness within through a process of introspection, inquiry, or vichara, and also meditation. And meditation, not in the sense of simply contemplating ideas, but trying to understand who we are in our true nature. As Upanishads state, the senses look without, and so we're caught in the outer world. The senses don't look within unless we turn them within. Similarly, today we have the senses magnified by all the audio, visual, and other forms of technology, which certainly has its value, but also tends to make us more extroverted. Sometimes we think we can find answers on a screen. We can look them up in a computer database. We forget that we need a living, creative, original intelligence, direct perception, and direct awareness. Merely repeating secondhand opinions can help us learn certain things, but it cannot connect us to the essence of reality. If you go out into nature, to understand nature, you have to be silent. You have to be receptive. The sky, the rivers, the mountains, the trees, we can classify them and understand them through geology, botany, so many things. But there is another dimension of being and consciousness that we could say is something that is qualitative rather than quantitative. You can't measure the value or the beauty of a mountain. You can say it so has a certain size or it contains various minerals, but there is also a living presence and power there that connects us to a sense of cosmic reality, something eternal, not just simply something out there as an inert material substance. So too, as we turn our awareness within, we can discover other things about ourselves, other creative capacities, other levels of consciousness. We can hold an awareness through waking, dream, and a deep sleep, as Upanishads state. We can, through meditation, gain a sense of space, infinity, boundlessness, peace, ananda, shanti. We can also gain a sense of focus, unity, clarity, a sense of boundless being that's not limited to or defined simply by the parameters of our physical bodies or by the terminology and thoughts of the mind. Bharatiya tradition teaches us through Advaita, Vedanta, so many traditions that you are not just a body. You are much more than that. The body is part of that. You are not just a mind. Mind is an instrument of expression, a tool for knowing, but you have a deeper direct awareness that you can also discover and unfold. In other words, we are embraced by a great unknown on the inside and on the outside that can be known through direct awareness, but cannot simply be limited to name, form, number, time, place, person, or the coordinates of the outer world and the coordinates of the mind. We have a deeper reality, a self, Atman, Purusha, consciousness, enlightened nature. Many names can be given to that, which connects us to the universe as a whole. And the universe as a whole follows a certain law and order, not based upon human dictates or even some deity commandments, but on the nature of the conscious universe, the principles of what we call Dharma, as even the principles of dharmic living, and as in the yamas and niyamas of the yoga teachings and all the Bharatiya dharmic principles. The emphasis then is on harmonizing ourselves with the universe as a whole and the universal laws, which are not just laws of physics, they're ultimately laws of consciousness. So in that context, we in the Bharatiya tradition connect human life with the universe as a whole. We don't start history simply with the human being. We start history with the beginning of the universe, the beginning of the Brahmanda, with cosmic cycles of time, with connections to many other lokas, subtle, transcendent, many other views. So we have a civilization that is cosmic and rooted in the eternal and the infinite, and has as its goal for human beings to gain a self-realization that connects us to the self-aware universe overall. In that context, we have an unfoldment of human culture, art, music, architecture, so many things, science and all of its forms, medicine. And we also, of course, have our necessities in life, economically, politically, where we live, so many things going on, adaptation, remaining in harmony with the life around us, respecting nature, respecting the other creatures, and respecting and honoring human beings, but based upon a fundamental unity, which is also called the Advaita or non-duality. So let's just explore briefly what that is. The fact that we mean that there is an underlying unity to the universe and the whole of life doesn't mean we are promoting uniformity, one belief, idea, faith, image, person, institution, view, ideology for everyone. That is not what we're saying. Bodies and minds of creatures are different. Each body has its unique structure and energetic. In Ayurveda, we have to determine the individual constitution before we can treat that person. We don't have an en masse treatment. We have one that considers the laws of nature, but as manifest in the particular individual and their energetic structure, physically, pranically, and also in terms of the mind. And the minds of human beings are all different. Everybody's going to have a different point of view because we're looking out from a different perspective, or even looking in from a different perspective. So we must honor these different points of view. We also have different thoughts, and language is different. You'll even notice that today, certain things are no longer said to be linguistically correct that were linguistically mainstream just a decade or a few decades ago. Language is changing. Culture is changing. But the consciousness is one. And by consciousness, we don't mean the function of the body, brain, or mind. We recognize an inner being that is more than that. So you are one with the tree. I say that very clearly. You are one with the tree, but you are not a tree. The tree has a different form of movement and expression than you do. The unity is at the level of being and consciousness. You are one with all human beings at the level of being and consciousness, but they're going to have different points of view. They may be right or wrong. They may be partial or complete. In fact, all points of view in the mind are in somehow limited and transient in nature. We have thoughts relative to things that are going on at a certain place or for a certain period of time, but there's not absolute. You put on your coat in the winter when it's cold. You don't have a rule that says you always wear coats regardless of circumstances. That would be a silly thing to do. So all ideas of the mind are contextual, and they may be true at a certain time and place or to a certain degree, but we need to have an inner consciousness that looks at what's going on. You know, your house is a nice place to live, but if a fire is going on there, you have a very different action that you're going to take in your own home than you are on a relaxing afternoon. So in the Bharatiya tradition, we emphasize direct perception over mere ideas. Ideas have their place, but we have to go back and see things as they are, which is ultimately more than any measurable structure. I have a certain statement I often tell students. I'll tell it to you also here. Ever since we have been around as a species, as human beings, we have been busy measuring reality, and that is external reality. We have developed every form of measurement, equipment, technique to measure the outer reality. Now we have all the computers and technology to add even more to it. But however much we measure reality, whether ourselves or externally, there's always something left over in the end that is immeasurable. And that unknown that is left over, immeasurable in the end, is the true reality. Maya is just the surface measurement, the coordinates we need to function at the surface of the world. But the depths of reality cannot put into or limited by name, form, number, appearance, or quantity. We cannot reduce a human being to a set of quantities. political affiliation, age, gender, bank account, profession. The real person is something more than that. And the real person cannot be limited or circumscribed by these outer factors, however important they are in terms of our function or expression. And mainly we define ourselves as human beings socially. Our name, our position in society, we're social beings. You know, we grow up in a family, we're educated in schools, we're interacting with other people constantly, which is very important. But our social identity is not our true nature. It's an appearance we make or a way we express ourselves circumstantially in society. Each person is a manifestation of that infinite or eternal being, the cosmic Purusha. Now, today with technology, we are moving towards a virtual reality. But you are not a virtual reality, whether the virtual reality of your body or the virtual reality projected through a screen or the media, though these are important instruments of expression and action, we have to understand and work with. The interesting thing I see today is that with all this technology that expands our horizon in time and space, we're still becoming more physical in our identity. We're still becoming more defined relative to our body or relative to a virtual image of our body, which sometimes doesn't quite look like us and maybe even look quite a bit better than we are, or perhaps a little bit focused in a certain way. But let's just look at the world in which we live today. You're not limited to your body. Your physical body is a point focus for an awareness which is non-local. Here we are communicating across the planet through a screen. So you can see the image of my body, the face, whatever else is there, but there is a communication via the mind. Even in your mind, you can, and in your studies, you can read books from people of other historical eras on subjects that you may not know. You can contemplate the universe, you can contemplate philosophy, different points of view, different types of art. The mind has a broader horizon. The body's in one place at a time, although we can put it on a plane and take it across the world. So we have a reality that expands, or that can expand. And we go out in nature, we can feel ourselves one with the sunset, the clouds, the river, the sky. We can identify with different things, beings, creatures, devatas. We can have a sense that we are not just this physical structure. And we watch this body grow, change, get old, decay. At a certain age, we have to recognize we're not going to be around forever, and we should be concerned about the non-physical aspects of reality that we may soon be joining. We have the vanaprastha and sannyasa phases of the Bharatiya tradition that tells us that. We have different phases of life, different duties, different dharmas. But part of our issue of technology today is recognizing that we must be connected to an inner reality. The limitation of technology is it's so overwhelming, we can let our technology dominate us. We can Google for answers rather than think about or contemplate a subject. We can believe in what a screen is doing. Let me tell you a few things about screens. In order for a screen to engage us, the screen must have a lot of things going on the screen itself. If it's just a blank screen, we can't watch it very long. But the screen is also made of an electrical force. And so we're being connected to an electrical movement, which is a kind of drug. I call it a digital drug that causes our nervous system to function in another way. We start to emulate the technology. The mind tends to imitate whatever it gives its most attention to. So if we're looking at cell phones all day long, we begin to think like a cell phone. or we begin to think of ourselves as being like a cell phone. And if the person's in the same room with us, we may still be trying to contact them via the cell phone rather than as the living person. So the technology has challenges, it gives us benefits. And what we must remember is that we need an inner consciousness to guide and direct the technology. We must be masters of our technology. I also say that the media is, I should say the world is Maya, but the media is the Maya of the Maya. So we must be very careful with what the media presents, because it's always just a certain point, a certain view, a certain perspective of a camera, of a certain group that has a certain slant or view. Everybody's going to have a view. There's nothing wrong with that. But we shouldn't consider that there is somebody who is totally objective, or that truth can be found simply by discussion or journalism on the outside, rather than deep inquiry on the inside, and a lot of dialogue, discussion, and understanding what is there behind the appearances. So what the Bharatiya tradition, through all of its dharmic path, teaches us is how to reclaim our own integrity, awareness, direct perception as individuals, which is similarly connected to the whole of life and the universe overall. And that's the deeper awareness we need to address technology. Technology talks about, okay, we're in a global or a planetary age, but we still don't understand the planet. We talk about ecology, but it is not just about the biosphere and living creatures. The earth itself is a living being. It has a consciousness. In the Vedic thought, we call these things Devatas. Devatas doesn't mean some anthropomorphic god somewhere. It means a cosmic principle connecting us to the cosmic reality. The sun in the sky is not just a singular globe giving light to our solar system. It's a connection to forces of light, life, intelligence, consciousness in the universe as a whole, which are becoming embodied on Earth through the energies of the planets, the energies of the atmosphere, the energies of the whole of life and the universe as a whole. So we are in an ecological age also, but true ecology is recognizing the consciousness everywhere. And Vedas, when they talk about Purusha as the consciousness principle, they say Purusha Vedam Sarvam, Purusha is everything. But they also talk the Yaso Aditya Purusha, Purusha in the sun, Purusha in the moon, Purusha in lightning, fire, the waters, the earth, the consciousness that is everywhere. That doesn't mean there's some anthropomorphic creature hidden in these things, but that there is an inner being, and that we are not just anthropomorphic individuals, we are also cosmic beings and the cosmic presence. So the Bharatiya view is to bring in this universal aspect, which is ultimately Advaitic yogic aspect of civilization, and tell us that we have to integrate ourselves with the whole of life, not just with our other human brothers and sisters, but with the whole of life, and have the same respect for all of life and for the planet as a whole as we would for any living being. We don't run over a person in the road, but why should we be exploiting and running over nature and natural resources simply because the consciousness there doesn't have an expressive mind to say, hey, you're doing something that's incorrect, you're interfering, you're harming, you're causing trouble. So what's happened today is India had its independence only 70 plus years ago. And it's been gradually expressing itself in the community of nations. World culture, even before Swami Vivekananda started taking a Bharatiya yogic message to the world in the 19th century, as did others. And it was going throughout the world at many times through different individuals, groups, teachings, organizations, or even just through the silence of mind. The meditative mind of a silent sage can influence the minds of people all over the world without having to go anywhere, because it is changing the mental environment for the planet as a whole. But as India came into the Western civilization, modern civilizational scene post-World War II, that civilization was defined in a non-dharmic and non-Bharatiya way. I'm not saying it's necessarily wrong, but it had a different orientation. And so as India awakened as a culture and civilization, history, philosophy, it was reduced and sometimes denigrated, misinterpreted by the model of civilization culture that has been developing predominantly in the Western world over the last few centuries or even decades, and which also has various points of view. It has various benefits, but it doesn't have the fundamental values or perceptions to understand the Bharatiya world view or the ancient sages. And I say this only in a general way, because obviously there has been a great appeal for the yoga traditions, Vedanta, Buddhism, etc., to minds throughout the world. There's a kind of Indic counterculture all over the world. In every country I go to, you have a group of people involved in yoga, Ayurveda, who have temples, meditation, all these things, who are also working in the social order in some ways, whether it's as doctors, teachers, ecologists, various things, and all of that. So there is that presence, but it remains in the background. Today, India is becoming more expressive with its culture, spreading its culture, not as a way of dominating people or creating a one-sided belief, but of opening us to a cosmic present and to our rishi and yoga traditions. Not just simply our traditions through technology, economics, and politics. So that is going on. So we have the Ram Janmabhoomi, the Ram Mandir coming up in Ayodhya, the resurrection of a temple that was destroyed hundreds of years ago. We have the coming back of a culture that had been under hostile rule, or at least insensitive rule for a long time, having its voice in the world and reaching out. For example, Sri Ram is honored throughout Asia, Indonesia. Yoga meditation practices are relevant to everyone. So that culture coming up is important. It's not against anybody, but it is for maintaining or giving the Bharatiya civilization its place, which is very important, not to the exclusion of others, but to the integration of the human being back into the universal consciousness, rather than the human being dominant over all, human beings divided among one another. So in that regard, India has an important future, the revival of Bharatiya culture, not in simply reclaiming or restoring a past, though that is important, but the universal and futuristic view of the Bharatiya culture that recognizes there are many Brahmandas, there are many lokas, there are many universes. The universe is aware time can be taken back billions and billions of years. So there is this, you might say, futuristic science aspect of Bharatiya culture, futuristic medicine, psychology, so many things that is also there. But it needs to be given its place, and that heritage of India should be honored and presented in the Indic tradition. The children of India should understand the civilization that has gone on. It shouldn't be interpreted or restricted by an outside view that doesn't understand it. But it should have its place, and it should have its place in the world. The Indic view is required, a Dharmic view is required, a recognition that human civilization should be connected to the whole of life, Dharma, civilization, and self-awareness. So this is the view I like to bring into presenting the Bharatiya tradition. And it's relevant to all human beings. Bharatiya tradition says the goal of human life is self-realization, not simply realization of the physical or the psychological or the social self, but your connection to the universe as a whole and how the entire universe is mirrored within you. So that is, of course, relevant to everyone. Other goals of life, dharma, artha, kama, have their place. But this moksha, this liberation, this connection to the infinite, the universal, is the most important. And it should be given its voice. And we should speak out and bring it, give it its proper place. Because in the world today, you must speak out, you must have a presence, you must vote, you must have your ideas given in the discussion and presented in the teachings, the books. Even if others may disagree, we need to have a Bharatiya point out there in the discussion to give a complete civilizational view. So as students, you have many challenges. You have to learn the new technology. You have to understand the history, the views of Western civilization, of other civilizations and other religious views. But at the same time, you need to understand and preserve and promote the Bharatiya view, which has relevance to all and can add more depth and can also serve as a point of integration for the human being and the universe, because that is what we really need. Peace among human beings is not possible unless we integrate ourselves with the whole of life. That is the message of the great rishis and yogis, and of great philosophers, poets, scientists, mystics, artists all over the world who've looked to the universal, who've looked into nature and have looked towards an inner self. And so many of these have honored the Bharatiya tradition. So with these words, I will stop this formal aspect of my talk so we can have some discussion from you. Again, I'm just sharing ideas. We need to come together and do our own internal churning and find the truth within us. So again, I thank the organizers for bringing me into this event and giving me the opportunity to share my perspective on the Bharatiya tradition. And I hope it helps you understand that even those outside of India can see the deeper depth of this tradition and its relevance as a way of knowledge as well as a way of culture. Hari Om.
Thank you so much, Dr. David Frawley. So we already have some questions coming in the chat box. So shall I read out the questions, Doctor?
Certainly.
All right. What are the interconnection between religion and spirituality? Are all religions necessarily spiritual?
Yes, it's a very important question. One, we have to remember too that certain terms like religion and spirituality have different meanings and reflect different things. Sanskrit is a much more precise language in this regard, but of course we have to use the current discourse. So religion as a term is dominated by certain religions that have come to dominate the planet, mainly the Abrahamic traditions, Christianity, Islam, Judaism, because this was the idea of religion in Western society and its colonial power. I remember some 25 years ago, we were releasing a book in London called Explaining Hindu Dharma, which is the first textbook on Hinduism to be released in the British schools. They honored me by having me be part of that release. And I was discussing with them about how the book was done. And they said that when the British government asked them to do a book on Hinduism, they gave them a template. And the template said, one God, one prophet or savior, historical revelation, one book you go to, all of that. And so the Hindus had to say, we can't follow that model. That is not our model. We have a different view. So the religious model of the West is dominated by certain monotheistic traditions. I'm not saying they're right or wrong, but it's a certain view that the rest of humanity doesn't share. Other views have been classified as polytheistic, but I have to say, I've been connected to indigenous traditions here locally and throughout the world. Even the Native Americans here are much more respectful of the sacred nature of life and their natural environment than the urban people, whether they're scientific or religious or not. So you have to understand what a religion says. And religion is also something we could say in life like art or science. There are many different points of view. But generally, religion refers to certain beliefs, sometimes rituals belonging to a particular group or community. Spirituality is generally more an experiential term, an inner experience, but there are many types of mysticism or spiritual experiences that a person can have. In some cultures, certain herbs or drugs are used, and other cultures, various music, trance, various things are there. And one can experience altered states of consciousness on various levels, some that could be called religious, some can be called occult, spiritual, naturalistic, any number of things. We have mystics that will be connected to one deity form, but not to others. So we have to understand the variety. And religions have different points of view. For example, we can say that all human beings have a common urge for justice, right? But we can't say that all law codes are equal or the same. Human law codes can be very different. We can say that all human beings have a certain creative or artistic expression, but we can't judge all art forms in the world by the rules of one particular art form. You can't judge Hindu temples by modern abstract art, for example. They're not following the same views, even though they may honor the diversity and also understand the points of view. Some religions teach that there's one life followed by heaven or hell. Vedic and Dharmic traditions teach you have many lives with karma and rebirth. Both of these views cannot be true. So we're not saying that you have to say you have to eliminate one or the other, but we go beyond the boundaries of organized or institutionalized or dogmatic religion to some inner experience. And the deepest experiences in the Dharmic traditions are in states of samadhi, which are states of unitary consciousness in which we can go beyond words, which are always limited, and thoughts. And whether it's the Buddhist, the Jain, or the Hindu Sikh traditions, where we emphasize samadhi, we go beyond outer distinctions to a recognition of this unitary reality. So I hope that addresses that very complex question, Hari Om.
Yes, sir, definitely. Thank you so much for the answer. The other question that we have here is, as Shankaracharya ji is one of the promoter of Advaita Vedanta, why has he established mandirs?
Okay. If there is Advaita, why are there mandirs? Why are there murtis? Why did Shankaracharya talk about these different lines, Shaiva, Shakta, Vaishnava, Ganapata Saura, etc.? Why was he himself a Devi worshipper and did all these wonderful stotras, Soundarya, Lahari, Tripura Sundari, Stotra, Bhavani, Ashtakam, so many things? Well, we have to understand that we are human beings and we have different aspects to our lives, and there are also different aspects to the universe. In teaching Advaita, they also had to write books. They had to have schools. And you have to train people, right? You can't take a child in the first grade and give them an Advaita. We have a certain means of learning. And the Advaita the unitary state is a very exalted state. It's not, you can't stumble into it. It requires a sadhana, a practice, and sadhanas have to be devised at an individual level. And then we have in the Vedanta and yoga, which we have another system, is adhikara. There's a certain level or prerequisites. For example, in mountain climbing, you can't climb the highest mountain if you've never climbed your local hill. You have to have certain inbred and skills that are gained. So approaching Advaita requires purification of body and mind. Deha Shuddhi, Chitta Shuddhi. We have to have some mastery of, we have to move beyond the ego, because the true self can't be found as long as we're caught up simply in the body, mind, and external social identity. So we also have these factors of ritual, devotion, mandirs, where we can communicate, come together, where we can explore various types of worship, and also where we can understand how the mind works, and we can see the different place. Sometimes people ask me, well, what is the relevance of this kind of devotion that can be dualistic with the Advaita? And my answer is the closest thing to one is two. If we can understand the basic forces in the universe, Jivatman, Paramatman, or, Ishvara, Parabrahman, then we're very close. But we don't have to differ on names and forms. Names and forms by way of concentration can help us move to the transcendent. The goal is to have a sadhana that develops our potentials and that takes us by degrees to the inner reality, and to understand the need to have a lifelong sadhana. It's a long dedication. It may take many lives. We are moving, we are in a realm of great diversity, understanding the unity behind it. When you understand the great banyan tree as one, you don't have to cut off the leaves, cut off the aerial branches, or even cut down the tree. You can honor all the diversity. So we live in an ocean of consciousness. The outer world is like the waves on the sea. As we move within, the waves may get deeper, we go into deeper currents, but ultimately the ocean includes the waves as well. Hari Om.
Thank you for the answer, Doctor. We have another question asking, does astrology work?
Yes, does astrology work? Well, again, we have to understand what is meant by things. We live, and of course, language has certain connotations, and words have histories, and various terms also have a certain baggage ideologically, politically, scientifically, or whatever it may be. And that's why it's very important that whatever we look at in terms of the Bharatiya civilization, we go back to the original terminology and understanding involved. And unfortunately, in this context, even Bharatiya terms that have gone global, like yoga, have gained a different meaning than what they had in the tradition. Now yoga has become asana. That may be part of yoga, but that wasn't the meaning of yoga. So in the case of the Jyotish, there was this understanding that the universe as a whole is connected, and the forces of light in the universe are not just projecting to us light as a material force, but powers of life. After all, sunlight also allows life to exist on the planet. The Gayatri mantra is to the intelligence, the cosmic connection of the sun. So there are various factors. There's also a prana through the stars, the planets, the movement. The universe has its own prana. And in this regard, there's time following the seasons, the days and night, the sun and the moon. You have your Panchanga. So the Jyotish is teaching us that there is also a cosmic aspect to time. a natural aspect to time. We live in this clock-based time, but the biological time in our body is measured by the breath. It's not measured by the clock. And as the Vedas say, the prana is our inner sun, and the movements of the inner sun is measured by the outer sun. So we also have a movement of days and nights and seasons within us. So it's an extension of this idea or this understanding of natural and cosmic movement of time. It's not simply about fortune telling or predicting the future. That's really not something we can do. We can see the trends going on in the various factors around us, but there is also our own karma and our own actions that are going on. But in this idea of science in the Vedic sense, we try to understand how the universe is connected to our biology, our psychology, even our society, how time affects us at a cosmic level, not just at a yuga level, not just through the clocks and through our view of history. Even human beings we know have been on the planet for more than 2 million years, and yet we're working on a historical timeline of less than 5,000 years. It seems that we've missed something here, but we need to expand that vision according to what the great yogis and rishis can also offer us, not to blindly accept, but to bring into a deeper understanding of consciousness. Hari Om.
Thank you, Doctor. We'll take one last question. The person asks, what are your views on dismantling Global Hindutva Conference?
Yes, I have written about that, and I've said a little bit about that. First thing, it's very good to see that the Hindus are being noticed. And we must note that the Hindus are the most affluent and educated of the immigrant religious groups in the West. And they're occupying some of the highest positions in medicine, education, government, and they are the most peaceful community that has concerned itself with the welfare of all the other communities. So who are these people who are afraid of Hindus? It's interesting, most of the speakers at that conference were largely Marxist imported from India, who of course don't like the Hindu tradition, including speakers who are actually prominent representatives of Marxist-Leninist parties and self-proclaimed Marxist-Leninist revolutionaries. There's nothing wrong with giving them a point of view. You have Marxist in education throughout the world to some degree, but making them the spokespersons and defining what Hinduism is seems to be a bit out of place. We don't let them define what Christianity or Islam or even anything else is. They certainly have their points of view. More mosques in the history of the world were destroyed by Joseph Stalin in the Soviet Union than by any other figure. So we have to understand the background and just see the bios of the individuals who were speaking and the topics that they were bringing up. And there is a certain jealousy in these groups of the success of the overseas Indian and Hindu diaspora that is coming out. And there's also, for a long time, they've had a lot of jealousy and unhappiness with the global spread of Hindu Dharma through Yoga, Vedanta, Ayurveda, and all of that, and attempting to discredit that. But their views are very easy to see relative to their background, their thoughts. So they should have better called the conference a contemporary Marxist critique of perhaps what they regard as Hindu Dharma. I don't think there was a practicing Hindu among them, but it's important that Hindus need to be able to express themselves and tell others. All Indian, or particularly all Hindu students, should know what Vedanta is and be able to explain it to the members in their society when they move, oh, well, what religion you follow? You can say, well, I accept all religions. That's not possible. You can't accept every possible dogma. What you have to explain, yes, we follow the Hindu Sanatana Dharma, we have karma, rebirth, moksha, we have different philosophies, we have mandirs, rituals, ecologies, so many things. So it shows that a Hindu voice needs to speak up more. And distortions of Hindu Dharma in academia and the media must be challenged. And in this regard, I have to say the universities are very good on Hinduism in many fields. For example, in science and other areas, Hindu views are often respected amongst scientists. It's certain humanities and history departments, largely dominated by the far left, and who also dominate the humanities overall. And sometimes they also join religious studies, but they never examine Vedantic philosophy, samadhi, higher states of consciousness, Atman, all these things. They try to create negative political critiques of caste and other things to further their own political agenda. So we should be aware of these things. We should counter them. But the fact is they cannot win the battle. Their views are very limited. We need to show who they are, and we need to let our view come out and at a level of discussion, study the full Hindu tradition. You talk about, Manusmriti. Manusmriti is one of many law codes of 2,000 years ago. I think it's fairly good for a law code of 2,000 years ago. We don't judge Christianity by the law codes of Charlemagne or the Middle Ages or even the book of Leviticus and the Bible anymore. But let us study the Vedanta, the Upanishads, all these things, and let us experience them. And I tell people in the West, take the children to the Hindu temple. It's in your community now. Take them to have Hindus come and speak. Let the Acharyas, let the local Hindus speak. Let us make it a democratic experience, not something controlled by certain academic factions. And that should be part of your education as well. Share, explain, expand the teachings with respect, and show their relevance. And again, Hindu tradition is not based upon a fixed code at one point of time. It is based upon adaptation of Dharma, respect for the individual, respect for nature, different karmas involved. So we say, do what is the best possible in any given circumstance. That is what we need to do, not simply following a proposition for a certain circumstance that existed once that may not exist today, and ultimately aim at the greatest understanding and embracing of the whole of life and the greater universe. Hari Om.
Thank you for your answer, Doctor. We have Professor Satyendra Srivastava who wants to ask you a question. Professor, you may unmute yourself and ask your question.
It is not a question, sir. May I add something regarding the questions asked by students, sir? The question that asked, if God is everywhere, then what is the need of the temple or something like that, if you're Advaita Vedantin? This question was asked by Swami Vivekananda also, sir. And Swami Vivekananda replied in a very appealing way. He said that air is everywhere, but still we need a fan to fill the air more intensely. In the same way, God is everywhere, still we need a temple to feel God more intensely, more closely. Second thing is that we need temple just to understand a religious experience. That is for initial stages. For spirituality, we don't need any religious temple or we don't need any religious monument.
Well, thank you for those wonderful comments. So just a couple of points. One, let us remember the term Brahman in the Hindu tradition, not just God in the Western theological sense. I'm not saying that there's anything wrong, but sometimes these have different connotations. And the temple is not a place where some preaching goes on. The temple is a place where we connect to the cosmic reality. The Hindu temple is a replica of the universe as a whole, as per the Sri Yantra. And Hindu temples are rooted in nature. They're not just based upon what some historical person might have done at that place at some point of time, although that can be part of it. They connect us to the rivers, the mountains. They take the shape of the mountains. And the rituals are not about just some dogma. The rituals are about connecting to the sattvic energies of life, the fragrances, the lights, creating a sattvic environment. So they're a place of coming together. You can say the same thing about learning. You can learn anywhere, but you have certain institutions of learning that it's easier to learn at. So too, temples are inspired by the sattvic environment, by the tapas behind them, by the history. So they do have a place, but you should also have a temple in your own home. And we also have the Manusa Puja, the inner aspect of the ritual. Deity is aspect of the entire universe, universal consciousness, Paramatma, and the supreme scripture is the whole of life, the mantric powers of nature, the mantric vibrations behind the universe as a whole. So temples have their place. You may not want to go to all of them. They may be crowded. They may be difficult to get to. But pilgrimage and the temple is an important part of human religion and even spirituality, and can aid in spiritual experiences if we go to them with an inner openness. If we take the ritual merely mechanically, then of course that's another thing. But temples have their place, or wherever we create a sacred space. We need a sacred space to meditate. If you have a cluttered room and you sit down to meditate, it doesn't help you. You need to have a sacred space that's sustained with certain flowers or incense or representational forms, artwork. Temples are among the greatest places of art in the world, Hindu temples. The wonderful sculpture, architecture, music, dance, these also are a very important part of spirituality. If you throw away art from spirituality, is it spirituality that you have, or are you breeding intolerance? We can certainly go beyond all forms, that's also there. But we should be open to the creative expression of life as also part of the spirituality. And one of the beauties of the Hindu Sanatana Dharma is all of that is included and given its place. And yet we also allow the individuals to have their own choices and go their own ways. Ishtadevata can be done, or you can just simply go to the Atman within directly. Hari Om.
We are really grateful to you, Doctor, that you answered all these questions so patiently. You spared so much time for us. We are really grateful for that. And coming towards the end of the program, giving a reluctant goodbye, when I'm saying this, I'll be saying on behalf of everybody, I think that we'd love to hear you more. We'd love to hear you. And looking forward to organizing more sessions with you, hearing you more, and the next time in person, seeking blessings from you in person for the future endeavors that we take under your directions. Thank you so much to everyone for joining. We seek your blessings, Dr. David Frawley. Before we leave, thank you so much. Pranam.